quality over quantity, right? It only takes one person, and we have more than one person here, and therefore the entire world is represented in this tent. All right, so this morning I'm going to go over a presentation I titled Tech Convergence and Deaf People's Existential Ambiguity. I've thought about this for quite a long time, looking at deaf people, hearing people. How do we present ourselves? How do we present ourselves to each other? How do we build relationships between the different communities? And this is not a new question, obviously. So I want to talk about this technological convergence and then existential. And what I mean by existential is, like, what's the purpose of my life? What am I doing here? Okay, I'm born, I'm deaf. What's my place in the world, right? I live within a hearing context. How do I view myself within that context? These are existential or philosophical questions, if you want, right? Does my life have meaning? Does my life have value? How do I answer that, right? So the ambiguous part about that is the fact that we don't have solid answers to these questions at every point in our lives, right? So, like, why are you here? Do most people respond with, because, obviously because I'm doing this because my life has a purpose, right? So we'll talk about technology and how it interweaves through these different concepts, right? So, and thanks, Natasha. So, deaf people navigate the world through technology, right? Interpreters are technology, just human technology, through subtitles, closed captioning, video phones, WhatsApp, Zoom. These are all technologies that we use every single day. Pen and paper is another kind of technology that we use to navigate the world. So this is not a new thing. We're used to technology. Hearing people invented the phone, I think, 1846 might be the right date. So we have to remember it took 127 years before we had video phones, right? From the invention of the telephone to video relay services, it was about 127 years, right? So I want you to think about that timeline, right? Within 127 years, how did we build relationships with telephones, with conferences, with businesses, calls, conference calls? How did we negotiate ourselves in the world within each other, sharing our values and ideals through that technology for 127 years before we got to video, right? So we're looking at this as a process of maturation. So we became much more skilled as humans in how to use the telephone for different purposes and different reasons, right? So it takes time for things to develop, is kind of the point of what I'm saying, right? So video phones are relatively new in respect of that. And with the video phone, like, do you have to say hi first? You say what's your name? What is video phone etiquette? So that's had to be developed. What is eye contact across 2D platforms? How do we develop that? How do people who use video phones across different cultures, how do they connect? Depending on what languages we're using, depending on whether or not you're using an interpreter. How do I know that the interpreter is understanding the other person correctly and is giving me the right information? So this all has cultural impact and our perception. And this is just one example, right? There are lots of other examples than the telephone, right? So we're talking about kind of something older, right? The telephone is something new. Now, if you move on to today and what the landscape is like, we've never seen it like this before. Right now, it's the first time in history, in the human epoch, that the entire world is able to connect with each other on a profound level because of technology. No matter what modality you want to use, video, audio, spoken, signs, arts, you name it. So technology is able to support whatever we want to do in terms of communication. That has never happened before, and it's very exciting. It's exciting for us as the deaf community, that's for sure. Right, so remember these kind of sidekick phones we used to have, and you had to put them on, you turn them on, you wait for them to connect to the tower or the satellite or whatever was going on. Obviously things have gotten faster, right? So we now have 5G, right? Which means that you can video with anyone at any time, no matter where you are. Now it's like literally at the push of a button, I can make a video, edit a video that's pretty sharp, and send it to somebody as a task I'm doing for work even, right? I think people don't realize that 5G is 500% faster than the previous generation, right? We don't all have 5G, right? It's only in certain spots, mostly in major cities, right? We're looking towards 6G, obviously, because things always move forward, right? In about maybe 2030, they're talking about 6G. It's going to be 100 times faster than 5G, which is mind-blowing. I don't even know what that means. What is 100 times faster than we have now? It's already fast enough, right? We're also going to have self-driving cars in 2030, right? So, and that's because of this 6G, right? 5G, especially 4G, when we were starting to think about self-driving cars, no way 4G can support a self-driving car because of the speed that it needs to react. 100 times faster than 5G. What's going to be possible with 6G, right? So that's just an open question. Another convergence of innovations that we have is the Internet of Things, right? So IoT, Internet of Things, is going to connect that car to everything around it. The drones that are flying above, the planes that are flying above, the phones that are all around, the music that's in the car next to it. It's going to connect everything. And then we have the AI, right? So we've been talking about this for years. AI is not a new thing in terms of what we thought. It's just the billions and trillions of lines of code that we've needed to develop it have now been released to the general public. And it's become one frame, which is AI. So, why do we have ChatGPT? Why has ChatGPT just stormed onto the landscape? It's because you have these transformers, they're called, right? Basically, these transformers are part of a system which no longer works from line to line. It works from system to system, right? And so systems are able to communicate with other systems, and that's why AI works so well. That's why ChatGPT gives you the answer you want, surprisingly, in such a quick amount of time. So we're basically moving on from linear languages, which are spoken languages in essence, and we're learning how to read video and read images in a non-linear way. So this is multimodal, non-linear language comprehension that allows AI to do what it does. It's mind-blowing, right? It can read your voice and know who's talking. And this is all already out there on the market. We have it in our homes, on our phones. So just people talk about, FaceTime. And when you put your thumb up now, when you're having FaceTime, you get like this bubble with a thumb up emoticon, and all these things are happening. It's also happening within engineering field, healthcare. We're all using gesture recognition. I think by 2035 it is. Gesture recognition will be a $90 billion industry. It's a massive industry. So, within all of this, where are we? Where are deaf people? Okay, so I want to move on to spatial computing. Right, so these are the augmented reality, the VR glasses that Apple just came out with. Meta, also known as Facebook, came out with their Oculus. Whatever these kind of toys are you put in your hands, and Apple is looking at gesture recognition through these different cameras that are on the bottom of the VR headsets. Before you had to have a controller, you had to have something in your hands for it to be able to recognize hand movements. Now you don't need that. What's next, right? So the convergence of all of these innovations, right? So let's connect all of these things. Let's connect the Internet of Things to everything else, to all the other things. When you bring all of this together, Ray Kurzweil, a very famous futurist, one of the few people who kind of predicted a lot of things that are happening now. He's still alive, actually. He's just somebody who thinks about the future of technology, right? Computers and whatever else. He talks about a singularity, which is a complex concept. Basically, he's thinking about all machines becoming one. It's like, all machines becoming one? Dude, you are crazy. Can you see what's happening? All machines are becoming one. Kind of. If you think about all these things as converging, right? So like, let's take all these things, make a chip, and put it in your brain. It's going to read your brain, and then what? I'm scared. I hope you are too. But that's the world we're moving toward. Right? So let's think about all these things, and then put genomics on top as kind of the frosting of all this stuff that converges. Right? So the genome, right, is a map of our insides, of our DNA, right? We're fully mapped out. We know the whole genome. The human genome is mapped out. So now we put technology on top of it. We have a scientist at Gallaudet, a geneticist, who's kind of driving through the human genome, right? So if we have technology that can drive through the human genome, take a snapshot of what's quote-unquote broken, deaf people might be hearing again in about 5 minutes, right? So there's a lot of ethical, obviously, considerations about this. We've got to go one by one. It's not like tomorrow we're all going to be hearing, there's a little relief in that. And there's different ways of being deaf as well, right? So for me, it's both scary and exciting at the same time, this kind of genomics part of the puzzle. It's exciting for things like cancer, right? Or, illnesses. We do want this. We want to clean up illnesses that people don't want, because we don't want people to live in pain. And then the scary / exciting part, the exciting part is for the first time the deaf community can have real conversations, because for a long time our purpose has really been more about sign language and deaf culture. But what does that mean? What are we preserving, right? That conversation has been a bit gray and awkward because we have never really been able to pinpoint our value until now. Wait for it. Sorry to leave you hanging. Because until now, with genomics, we can look ourselves in the face and ask ourselves the honest question. And that is what I'm excited about. And what I'm scared about is what the answer is. What are people going to say? What are you going to say? Right? I know deaf people are going to say, I know deaf people who are like, yeah, let's get rid of deaf people. Because if we can do it, why not? Right? That's scary. I want to take a little bit of time just to deconstruct some of the thoughts around this. Right? So let's look at these in their silos. Right? So technology is there to meet a human need or to solve a human problem. Right? It's not for anything else. Right? So let's say I'm walking, all of a sudden I get on my horse, then I realize I gotta stop, feed the horse, give it water, the horse gets tired, horse has gotta sleep. I want to go faster, right? I don't want 1 or 2 weeks to get across the countryside. Okay, now I got a car, right? This is a human need, and it's a solution to a human problem, right? So this is technology developing because of what we want, what we need, right? Human beings are culture-bearing primates classified as Homo sapien, right? Some people are more on the religious side of this, and some people are more on the more correct scientific side of this, as I am. Anyway, that's what human beings are. Culture is defined as language, ideas, values, customs, institutions, and ad nauseum. Language, and I hope you know where I'm going with this, right? So I'm breaking this down. So technology is to meet a human need. Humans are culture-bearing primates. Culture consists of language and a lot of other stuff. Right? So then I'm taking language. Our language is meaning-making between people and things that want to make meaning, right? So red, black, meaning what do these things mean, right? Things have meaning, of course. And they have different meanings for different people in different languages all over the world. Now let's look at death, right? As an example of language that we use, right? It doesn't mean we can't hear. It doesn't mean something else, right? Are we being consistent with our definition of death? Are we living death 24/7 as deaf people, right? This is unconscious, right? These questions about, hey, what do you have to offer me? Do I want to spend more than 5 minutes with you? Is this a stimulating, funny, amusing, worthwhile, profit-driven, whatever kind of, whatever you're after? Is that what you're giving me? Like, I'm hungry. Do you have food? Like, what am I doing with you? Right? What's the exchange? What am I giving you? What are you giving me? What do I want? What do you want? This is the basis of human interaction and what we do all day long. Within the family, outside the family, it doesn't matter. This is what we do. It's human behavior at its core. So, let's look at this, and we've zoomed in, right, from technology to language to one word, and I've chosen deaf for our purposes today. What value do we assign to global deaf people? Are deaf people around the world human enough, right? So let's go back to the top. We're all like, yeah, technology, we love it. It's so amazing, makes our life good. Who decides the technology? Who's the technology built for? Are deaf people building technology for ourselves? Who is this benefiting? If I want to make technology for deaf people, everyone else will be like, why? You're less than 1% of the population. Is this going to be worth my investment? What's my return on investment, right? We don't say it, or they don't say it, but the cost benefit of investing in a deaf-specific technological solution, let's call it, is probably not one that is economically viable. Which is why I put this quote up here. We are unwittingly taking ourselves out of existence. Talking ourselves out of existence. So what we're doing, I think, is we're kind of blindly falling into a pit that is there, but we choose to not see it, right? So this summit, right, this Deaf Technology Summit, most of this is a business meeting, right? Let's call it what it is, right? So let's look at the law of economics and the disability frame, or within the disability frame, right? I'm not an economist. Please do not ask me questions about this slide that are more specific than what I'm giving you, because I won't be able to answer you. I'm going to give you a very basic run-over of my understanding of the basic economic principles, right? And I'll do my best. Supply and demand. Incentives, right? So supply and demand and incentives. Supply and demand basically being like, how much do you have? right? So I got like, I have 300 bananas. Can I feed the world? Probably not, right? So there's more demand than supply, right? Right? So or you do it the other way, right? You got 20 people who want bananas. How many bananas does each person need? That's how much supply you need, right? Let's look at this. We have deaf people. We have a lot of deaf people. No, we don't. Deaf people, we are small. We're a small demand, right? For interpreters, let's say, right? So the supply is also small. There's not a lot of interpreters, and there's not a lot of demand. But in terms of what demand looks like, right? So we want to hire deaf people, right? We want more deaf people to be, working, and so hiring deaf people is a good thing, right? Interpreters, what's the demand for interpreters? The need for interpreters is there. The demand for interpreters, which has to do with the desire and availability and want to actually pay for this service, is a bit of a different thing, right? Incentives is, okay, so what is the motivation to pay for these interpreters that I'm looking at? Right? Love you. Love you. Right? But, where's the money, and how motivated are we to raise the money to pay these interpreters, right? So that goes to questioning our values, right? So we have a deaf customer, a deaf potential employee, let's say, okay, who comes in, and we're a company that has never had a deaf person before. How are we going to integrate you within our production run? Right? As a deaf person, how does that work? I've never done that before. We have to do a cost analysis of how much you're going to cost for us to bring you in, right? Okay, so who pays for interpreters? Does the government pay for the interpreters? Is the company forced to pay for the interpreters? Does the company have the choice to pay for interpreters, right? So these are different decisions that are made all the time. The perceived return on interest, what is that? What's perceived? Is it perceived as a burden or an asset to have a deaf person come into your company for the first time ever? So this is really basic economics, okay? Just going to let you mull over that for a minute. And I'm going somewhere here, so stay with me. I want to talk about perceived value versus real value. Perceived value is that, deaf people are dependent, they're very expensive to hire. It's inconvenience, because there's these inconveniences I didn't have before that I now have because I've hired a deaf person, right? I've got to take some funding that I earmarked for something else to pay for something for this deaf person, right? So I could pay two people, I could have two employees for the price of this one deaf person because of all the reasonable accommodation I have to give them, right? They're expensive, right? I got to take care of I got to take care of a small group of people, right? This is the perceived value. The real value is that we're a collective, right? And as a collective, and this is something I'm not going to have time to get into. If you want to buy me a beer, you can do this later. But the culture that we have within us is really, really valuable, but people don't see it because we don't wear it as clothing, right? We've got to figure out how to offer the value that we have as a deaf person, as a deaf person, and once they see that, they're like, oh yeah, actually that is worth the money, because now we're embracing diversity or whatever other thing that we value in our company. There was a concept maybe 20, 25 years ago called deaf gain, right? That came onto the scene. That looked into what deaf people's real value is. Gain. The gain is not only for deaf people, it's a win-win situation, right? Deaf gain is not only the benefits that deaf people have in being deaf, it's the benefits for everyone, right? So right now the world operates on these basic economic principles and perceived values of deaf and disabled people, right? So we have architects in the room, we have designers in the room, we have people here, Mez, who are designing avatars, making stories that everyone needs to hear, deaf and hearing. We have people who are starting to understand and put these real values into action, because that's how we prove that we're worth it. This is not something that's in the cloud. It's not a kind of philosophy. We need more people to do the same thing, to take perceived value of disabled people and turn it into real value, the collective value of deaf and disabled people, right? Another concept that I'm not going to get into, another conversation, is this disabled frame, right? So the disabled framework of value, and you can go as far as you want into that. So the technological convergence, the existential in-betweenness that I'm talking about, I want to bring these two concepts together because they're coming together at a rate that we cannot comprehend, because communication and technology is moving so fast, right? It's the idea of deaf people moving toward this existential change, and we recognize that we need to be involved in the genomics and the genome studies of everything, and we change the frame, change the concepts, and put it into the same machine that's already there. We can kind of curveball ourselves into a new place very, very much faster, and we can have more control. We're going to get there anyway. It's whether or not we want to get in the car before the car leaves. So this is something that is coming at us very fast, right? So we all know deaf schools are closing. They have closed. We all know there's more people with cochlear implants. There's more people who are saying no to sign language and for deaf people, but yes to sign language for hearing babies. And so this is going faster than we can, basically. And this is so strong. We can just as easily turn it in a different direction. It can be very easily turned into a different direction. So I want to make sure that we're going with the tide instead of against it. Jean-Paul Sartre, a famous philosopher, he says, existence precedes essence. Humanity has no essence. We have no essence. Nothing. All of us are blank slates. Okay? Which is why he said there is no such predetermined essence to be found in human. We create essence, and we are putting this essence into our deaf bodies. Everything we put in our deaf bodies as essence is fake. It's not new. We can step back from it. We can push pause on our essence. We can remove our own essence and put in some new fuel if we want. So, let's look at some stats. World Health Organization, right, they predict that by 2050, 25% of the population is going to be deaf. Okay, wonderful statistic. Who owns that? Who owns that narrative? It's not us. For sure it's not us right now. If you tell that to somebody else, right? So say, hey, did you know that in 2050, 25% of the world is going to be like us, like deaf people? How are you presenting that information, right? How do you connect with the other, with non-deaf people, in presenting this statistic, right? Just a question. We know, and we have proof, and we have scientific studies, and we have brain imaging studies, we have all the knowledge to be able to say sign language enhances the brain and productivity for all. Sign language is a positive thing for us as humans. It makes our brains healthier. Do most people know that? I'm not too sure. More importantly, who leads that narrative? Is it us? No. Visuspatial AI Copilot. What I mean by this is we take the space in front of us that we use in sign language. AI, right, is connecting itself with our brains all the time. Vis-a-vis right now, a robot, a phone, a computer, whatever. And these machines are our co-pilots. And by co-pilots, what I mean is, and you know what a co-pilot is, it's the guy who sits next to the pilot. When the pilot gets tired, the co-pilot takes over, right? And they go back and forth. So if we think of apps as our co-pilots, our machines as co-pilots, right? It's like, oh, what's that word? How did I want to finish that sentence? Oh, you've already finished the sentence for me. All I got to do is push spacebar and all these words fill in. We're doing this all the time. ChatGPT is a very powerful co-pilot, right? Tell me what, change this email to a tone that lawyers in Mexico like, and it does it for you, right? So we're using, this is a co-pilot, right? If we take all of that with the visual spatial realm that we live and communicate in, right? So let's say we don't have a computer in front of us, but we're signing something, and then all of a sudden that signing becomes an essay. It becomes a letter you're writing to somebody in your family that doesn't sign. The world becomes better. Your contribution becomes better. So the question about this future is, how do we leverage it as deaf people? So in looking and questioning our value, right, we're climbing the existential flagpole, right? We want to shift the value, perceived value of deaf people. We want to, right? We want a total change. And it's not hard to change the perception and the conversation to make it so that everyone values us a lot more. And how the way that we can do this is by disrupting our phonocentric worlds, right? So one theory that hearing people is that, okay, hearing people, they talk, right? They can hear themselves, and they can kind of validate what they're saying throughout that feedback loop, right? So our sense of self develops through that feedback loop, correct? Deaf people don't have that same feedback loop, right? It's a visual feedback loop, which is part of our collective value, right? Just as an aside. But this is also causing a bit of a rift between deaf and hearing people. Because hearing people are like, this is how I assign myself, value, identity, everything else. Deaf people can't hear my voice, so how do they value me? They can't even hear their own voice, so what the F's going on there, you know? So like, how do hearing people understand my essence and my existence if they can't hear it, right? So we have to figure out how to get over that hump, right? It's a theory, and obviously there's a lot more to be discussed there. But if it is true that AI can produce a voice, customized voice for deaf people, right? I would then have my voice, right? This is Ryan's voice made by AI, and obviously I'd pick a pretty manly cowboy voice for myself, right? And I'd be this, buck and bronco, all right? Every time I sign, my voice would come out, and I'd be manly, and you would obviously accept whatever I said, right? And I could change my voice from day to day if I wanted to, but this is a whole nother conversation. And with that change, people's perceptions of me would change, right? So what is the ideological impact of that? Obviously, it's that I can control my own narrative, finally, right? So Simone de Beauvoir, which is a very famous woman, said one is not born, but rather becomes a woman, right? I edited this a little bit. One is not born, but rather becomes a deaf person, right? So we are all born as a blank slate, and then our essence is thrown onto us as humans, as beings. The concept of hearing has changed because of deaf people. We can change ourselves as well. So I'm not here to, be a Friday morning pessimist, right? But I mean, I want to move forward in thinking that about the metaverse, like Mez talked about yesterday. The future of the internet is 3D, and 3D is at the core of deaf people's way of being, right? So imagine hands-free, touchless technology, right? Technology exists in the space in front of us, the 3D space in front of us. That's the future. Who naturally lives in the 3D space in front of our bodies? Deaf people, right? That's our advantage. That's the future. The future is exactly coming toward how we live and breathe and communicate. And we have to tell that story yesterday. We're already there. So we want to end deaf people's existential ambiguity and cement our place in the world by doing exactly that, by stating, hello, we're here, we have a lot of value to bring to everyone's future, and we have a lot to offer. We have to have the whole community understanding that, and therefore we'll be able to answer the question of, why am I here? What am I doing here? Why was I born? Right? Yesterday, all day, people were talking about accessibility. Accessibility, we talk about it every day, all the time. Do you know why? Because accessibility means that there's something that's already there, we arrive, and it's like we can't connect with it, right? So us having to change to connect with something that's already there doesn't mean that's not accessibility. We need to own it. If the concept of accessibility will disappear if we move beyond the charitable accessibility trope, if deaf people understand that. We need to demonstrate deaf people's true value through product development, design, and storytelling, us being involved with all of it, and then everyone wins. Thank you.